Join me today as I show you how I built this water pumping station using only bits from the dollar store. This thing is perfect for my hive terrain because it's modular, it can go into separate pieces, and it even has some vertical gameplay. So this all started with the water guns. It's now summer here in Australia, so the dollar stores are now stocking heaps of these little water guns for a few dollars. I'm just going to come in with my rotary tool and start cutting the different pieces into something more workable. And I immediately saw this piece and saw it as some sort of antenna or communications device, so I'm going to try and cut that down to size. Now, I got several different bits and bobs from the dollar store on my last trip, so I'm just going to go through and piece all of them apart. So I've got another water gun here, which has some more industrial looking shapes. The silver one looks more futuristic and sleek, whereas this yellow one here looks a bit more industrial. I also got this little foosball, this tiny little foosball. It sets up nicely. It's kind of janky because it is only $4. Once everything is put together, you can technically play foosball on it, but I really got it for some of the shapes that I saw through the plastic. This looks like some great grading and some really good tubes and interesting shapes. Now, another piece is all the plastic blister packs that all of the bits and bobs came in. So I've got some for some hot glue containers, some for some tiny little jars, some for markers, and some for that foosball table as well. I'm just going to cut them down and make sure they are nice and clean and fill them with some plaster. Not technically from the dollar store, but you know, it's something that you might have lying around anyway. Once they're dry, they just pop out really easily, and you can use those molds again and again. I'm really happy with these tiny ones. I think they look really cool, like some sort of canister or bottles or something. Now, the last piece from the dollar store are these gravel gratings, I believe they're called, from the fish section of the dollar store. Here in Australia, a lot of these stores have a bunch of things for fish tanks and aquariums, so I was able to pick up some of these. And they slot together quite nicely, but I'm going to get rid of those slots. I'm going to get rid of some of the pegs down the bottom to make it a bit cleaner, and use them on the rest of the build as well as some extra bits. Now I finally have all of my pieces all cut up and parted out. I'm just going to go through and sand any of the plastic areas that I want to be taking paint in the future, especially some of these seam marks that are pretty egregious on these little plastic toys. You can even come through with a knife or a scalpel and really cut into it and get rid of those lines. Or of course you can just go through with the sanding stick, put in some gumption, and you get rid of them. And I grabbed some plastic and paper straws as well, again from the dollar store, and I just start piecing those together as some little pipes running between different tanks. And to clear up any of the holes in the pieces, I use some cereal box cardboard. I mean, technically you can buy boxes from the dollar store, so I'd say that counts. And just piece together a bunch of different parts. Now, I'm really thinking about why this thing exists or what it does, and my idea is that it's some sort of water purification thing. So it takes water from one area, transfers it to another, adds a bunch of chemicals or something to make it drinkable. And I try to salvage as many pieces from inside of the guns as I can, because there are a lot of little gizmos and gadgets in there to work the pulling and triggering mechanism that I can use later on. And then for the nets, for the little foosball table, I'm just going to cut those apart, and they work great as little fence pieces. And I think this is a good start for the main mechanism of this water station. Now, I do cheat a little bit just for the building parts, where I just grab some cardboard and some cardstock and build these little cubes and coat them in some bicarb soda to give it a concrete look. And along the top, I run some of that drywall tape. That way it fits in with all the rest of my underhive terrain. But for all of the detailing on the buildings, I go back to all of the bits and bobs from that dollar store haul, and I start cutting up the little stick players for the foosball game and cutting them into 2 centimeter strips that'll serve as like little makeshift ladders that are built into the walls. You can see here on the side I've already stuck those plaster pieces down, as well as a few more little plastic pieces. And I'm going to cut up the rest of that goalpost to serve as some tiny fences to go along the top as well. And here you can see I stuck the main body of the water gun that kind of looks like a bit of a communications tower to the main body of this. And just as before, we're going back to all the pieces that we got with the main set of the dollar store haul, and we're just piecing it together to make it look like something interesting. There really is no wrong thing to do here. You just piece it together, and if you like how it looks, you continue. If you don't, take some pieces off and rework it and change it up, and keep trying until you have something that you're happy with. And of course, it's important to include a door on these buildings. So I just cut that out of the backing piece for the foosball table and add in a little piece of plastic that came off the little gravel grates that was meant to connect them and join them together, and just use that as a door handle and use some coffee stir sticks just to stick around as a bit of a door frame. To keep the elevation kind of theme that I've got in my underhive terrain, I'm going to add in a walkway or some ways to get between these two buildings specifically. So I just glue together a handful of straws to look like some overhead pipes. And with the other building, I build the front the same as the first with the door and the ladder, but then I add in some sort of pump that's pumping liquid down into the main system underneath, or perhaps up into some bottles. And then I even include some of these old empty Vallejo paint bottles, and I have one spilt out over the top with some hazardous waste pouring out of it. And to make that liquid, I just pour a bunch of hot glue onto the ground there. I connect those pegs that were originally as the legs of the main little gravel grating piece, and I just screw those in. And these pegs will allow the pipes to line up and slot in directly into the buildings, and also it just adds a little bit more detail. Now for painting all of this, it's really simple. I gave it all a base coat of a spray primer in grey, and then went over all of the metallic pieces in a silver paint. Once that is all dry, I pick out any of the colored areas like the doors, some of the canisters, some of the little bits and bobs coming out I paint in black, and just to set the different pieces apart from each other and add a bit more interesting color. And you don't need to worry about going too bright in these sections, because once we come through with a brown wash and a black wash, we can dull down some of those colors. So I just kind of haphazardly mixed together a burnt sienna and a bright yellow, and these two paints are quite translucent, so I just mixed them together with a brush with a bunch of dirty brush water on it to kind of make this haphazard rust wash and cover it over everything that would be metallic. And then I print out some textures as well and stick them on. So I start out with some hazard stripes just along near the ladders and along the ground in some areas. And then I also come through with some warning signs and some like keep out signs that I printed off and stick them all around a bunch of different areas. I kind of try to have at least 3 on each piece. That way they kind of have a lot more color on them than just the dry, drab browns and grays. I then give it all a final coat in a black wash just to pick out all of the shadows and also tie in some of the printed details. Now, if you're going to do this and you're going to cover it in a wash after, I'd be very careful with the printed details because sometimes if your wash is too dark, it can kind of completely saturate the paper and just change the white to a black. So you want to be really careful about that in certain areas and make sure you try to keep it lighter than you intend because it might end up getting a bit darker. Once the black wash is all dry though, we come in with just some silver just to highlight all of the raised edges again with a quick dry brush. And I am super happy with how these came out. They look really great and they piece together modularly really nice. And once you add on some scattered terrain as well, it brings it all life. Anyway, thanks for watching. Hope you learned something new. Hope you go out and try this with things you could find at your local dollar stores as well. I'll see you next week with something different.